Stop telling what's going on in your life. People often feel the urge to constantly share every detail of their personal experiences with others, whether it's through casual conversations, social media posts, or even unsolicited updates. While it might seem harmless or even natural to talk about your daily activities, feelings, or problems, there is a point where it becomes unnecessary or even burdensome to others. Communication is most powerful when it is relevant, meaningful, and balanced. When the focus of your speech or interaction becomes entirely centered around your life, it can alienate your audience and make the conversation one-sided. In any social or professional setting, people seek connection, engagement, and mutual interest. When one person dominates the dialogue with a constant stream of personal updates, it creates an imbalance. Others may feel unheard, bored, or overwhelmed. Conversation should be a two-way street where listening is as important as speaking. If your speech is filled with personal anecdotes that do not relate to the audience, it begins to sound self-centered. Over time, this habit can reduce your credibility and impact because listeners may start tuning you out. They may not relate to your experiences, or worse, they may feel like they are being forced to care about things that don't affect them. Moreover, when people frequently share too much about their lives, it can come off as an attempt to seek validation or sympathy. While seeking support is natural and sometimes necessary, it becomes problematic when it overshadows the purpose of communication. Constantly talking about yourself can make it seem like you are fishing for compliments, pity, or attention. That kind of behavior can push people away. Instead of inspiring empathy or understanding, it may create emotional fatigue in others. It is important to remember that everyone has their own struggles and stories. Being aware of this can help you practice humility and restraint in your speech. There's also the issue of privacy and vulnerability. Sharing too much about your personal life can sometimes backfire. Not everyone needs to know everything. Certain matters are best kept private or discussed only with trusted individuals. Oversharing can expose you to judgment, criticism, or even manipulation. Furthermore, constantly focusing on yourself might make others feel uncomfortable, especially in professional or formal environments. It distracts from the larger purpose and can make your speech less effective or persuasive. Instead of narrating the play-by-play of your daily life, aim to share ideas, insights, or stories that serve a purpose. Speak in a way that informs, inspires, or uplifts others. Make your audience feel included by relating your words to shared values, common experiences, or universal themes. When you do share personal stories, do it sparingly and with intention. Make sure they add value or illustrate a meaningful point. Otherwise, keep the spotlight off yourself. Effective speech is about connection and clarity. It is about knowing your audience and delivering what they need or want to hear. When you stop making everything about you, you create space for others to engage, reflect, and respond. This leads to more enriching and dynamic communication. People remember not just what you say, but how you make them feel. If they feel seen, heard, and respected, your message will carry more weight. In short, resist the temptation to constantly update the world on your life. Not every thought needs to be spoken, and not every story needs to be shared. Be mindful of the value you bring to your speech. Speak with purpose, listen with intention, and share with care. When you focus less on yourself and more on meaningful exchange, your communication becomes more powerful and respectful. Constantly talking about yourself makes conversations one-sided and can cause others to lose interest or feel ignored. When people engage in conversations, they expect a give-and-take exchange of thoughts, ideas, or emotions. If one person dominates the dialogue with constant updates about their own life, it begins to feel less like a conversation and more like a monologue. Over time, this behavior can become frustrating or even alienating to others. Everyone wants to feel seen and heard, and when one individual constantly brings attention back to themselves, it robs others a chance to participate meaningfully. This kind of self-centered communication can happen in both casual and formal settings. In daily life, it might look like someone always steering the conversation back to their own experiences, no matter what the topic is. For example, if someone mentions a tough day at work, and the response is immediately about how difficult your own job is, it dismisses their experience. It sends the message that your story matters more. This might not be intentional, but over time it becomes a pattern that damages relationships. In professional or public speaking environments, excessive self-focus can also weaken the impact of your message. Audiences generally seek relevance, inspiration, or new knowledge. If your speech revolves entirely around your own life without offering broader insights or connections, people may feel that the message has little value to them. Even if the stories are interesting, if there is no takeaway or connection to listeners' life, attention fades quickly. People naturally want to relate to others, not just observe them. When you share a story or thought, the goal should be to build connection. This is harder to do when the subject is always. Instead of saying what happened to you in detail, try shifting the focus to what someone else might relate to in that experience. Frame your words to invite reflection or shared understanding, rather than just providing information about your own life. In doing so, you make the other person feel included. Self-centered communication often arises from a desire to be understood, validated, or admired. These are human needs, but when they drive every conversation, they prevent deeper connection. Talking about yourself might make you feel better temporarily, but if it doesn't allow space for the other person, limits the growth of the relationship. People remember how you made them feel. If they leave a conversation feeling invisible or unheard, they are less likely to seek that interaction again. Good communication requires awareness and empathy. Instead of thinking about what you will say next about yourself, focus on truly listening. Ask questions, show curiosity about the other person's life, and allow silence when needed. These small acts show respect and interest. They make others feel valued. When someone feels you genuinely care, they are more open, more engaged, and more likely to remember what you said. Even when you have something exciting, painful, or significant to share, consider the timing and relevance. Is this the right person to tell, the right moment to speak, and the right way to say it? When you take the time to think about these things, your words carry more weight. They are more likely to be welcomed, understood, and appreciated. In the end, conversations are not competitions for attention. They are opportunities to connect, learn, and grow together. By stepping back from the constant urge to talk about yourself, you create space for richer, more meaningful interactions. You allow others to speak, to feel important, and to trust that they matter too. This balance builds stronger connections and makes your presence more respected and appreciated. People engage better when they feel included. Sharing too much personal detail can overwhelm or bore your audience. In every conversation or speech, there is an invisible contract between the speaker and the listener. The speaker offers something of value, and the listener gives their time and attention in return. When that value is missing, or when the speaker fills the space only with self-centered or irrelevant information, that contract begins to break. People start to feel like their time is being wasted and their attention slowly fades. Respecting others' time and attention is a key part of effective communication. When someone chooses to listen, whether it's in a one-on-one conversation or in a larger group setting, they are given something valuable. Time cannot be regained and attention is limited. Once it's lost, it is very hard to get back. This is why it's so important to make every word count and to make sure what you are saying serves a purpose beyond just satisfying your own need to speak. When you constantly share personal details that are not relevant or interesting to others, the message becomes diluted. It may feel meaningful to you, but the listener may not have the same connection to the experience. For example, giving a long explanation about your daily routine, your minor frustrations, or every small achievement might seem important from your point of view. However, to someone else who is dealing with their own challenges or priorities, it can come across as trivial or self-absorbed. This does not mean you should never share personal stories or feelings. It simply means you should be thoughtful about when and how you do. Ask yourself if the information helps the listener in some way. Does it inform them, inspire them, or help them feel understood? If not, it might be better to listen instead of speak. Being mindful in this way shows that you care about the person you are speaking to, not just about being heard. In today's world, where distractions are everywhere and everyone is busy, attention is a rare and valuable gift. When someone gives you their focus, it is a sign of respect. The best way to honor that gift is to make sure what you say respects their time. Keep your message clear, relevant, and engaging. Think about what the other person needs from the conversation, not just what you want to say. This shift in perspective can completely change the way people respond to you. One of the reasons people lose interest in a conversation or speech is because it feels disconnected from their own reality. If they cannot find a reason to care, they will stop listening. This is why it is so important to find common ground. Use examples or topics that relate to shared experiences or emotions. Speak in a way that invites people in, not in a way that pushes them out by focusing too narrowly on yourself. Another way to show respect for others' attention is to keep things brief and to the point. Avoid repeating yourself or going off on tangents that lead nowhere. The longer you talk without purpose, the more likely your listeners are to tune out. Learn to recognize when you've said enough and when it's time to pause, ask a question, or let someone else speak. This kind of balance makes communication more dynamic and enjoyable for everyone involved. By respecting others' time and attention, you build trust and credibility. People are more likely to listen to you again if they know you value their presence. They will feel that you see them not just as an audience, but as human beings with their own stories and concerns. This creates stronger, more meaningful connections and makes your words more powerful and memorable. Oversharing can expose you to judgment or misuse of personal information. Not everyone needs to know everything about your life. Some things are better kept private. When people speak freely about every detail of their personal experiences without considering the audience or the setting, they risk crossing boundaries that can lead to regret, discomfort, or even harm. While it might feel relieving or validating in the moment to express everything openly, the long-term consequences can be far more complicated. Your privacy is not just about secrecy. It is about protecting your emotional space and maintaining control over your personal narrative. When you tell everyone what is going on in your life, your relationships, finances, family issues, fears, or frustrations, you give away a part of yourself without knowing how it will be received. Some people may listen out of genuine care, but others may take advantage of that vulnerability, twist your words, or use them as gossip. You might think you were just being honest, but the wrong person hearing the wrong thing at the wrong time can turn your openness into a source of conflict or embarrassment. In many situations, oversharing can also affect how people perceive. When you talk too much about your personal problems or life details, people may begin to view you as unstable, attention-seeking, or emotionally dependent. This can damage your personal and professional reputation. Even in close relationships, constantly opening up without limits can create emotional fatigue for others. They may start to avoid deep conversations with you because they expect it to become overwhelming or uncomfortable. Knowing what to share and what to keep private is a form of self-respect. It shows emotional intelligence and maturity. People who manage their boundaries carefully are seen as confident and trustworthy. They speak with intention and understand that not every thought or experience needs to be spoken aloud. They choose the right time, place, and person to open up to. This kind of control over personal information is not about hiding the truth, but about understanding its value. Another issue with oversharing is that it sometimes comes from a desire to connect quickly or deeply with others, but the opposite often happens. Instead of forming stronger bonds, it can make others feel uncomfortable or pressured. True connection grows through mutual understanding and time, not through exposing all your vulnerabilities at once. When you give people space to get to know you slowly and naturally, trust builds in a healthier and more lasting way. Sometimes people overshare because they are dealing with stress, anxiety, or loneliness, and speaking openly feels like a form of relief. While it is good to express emotions and seek support, it is important to choose the right outlets. Close friends, trusted mentors, or professional counselors are better equipped to help with deep or sensitive issues. Sharing private struggles with people who are not close to you or in casual settings can make you feel even more isolated if they react poorly or ignore your vulnerability. Once something personal is shared, you cannot take it back. Even if the person promises to keep it private, there is always a risk that it may be repeated, misinterpreted, or used against you. That is why it is important to pause and think before you speak. Ask yourself whether the person you are sharing with has earned your trust. Consider how the information might be received and whether it helps or harms your situation. Choosing to maintain some level of privacy does not mean you are distant or dishonest. It simply means you are protecting your peace and choosing wisely who gets access to your deeper thoughts and experiences. In doing so, you not only preserve your own dignity and control, but you also create healthier, more respectful relationships with others. Share stories or experiences when they add value, teach something, or connect with the listener's interests. Speaking without purpose often leads to disconnection, boredom, or confusion. Every time you speak, especially in a group or formal setting, you have an opportunity to make an impact. That impact is lost when the message is filled with personal stories that do not serve a clear reason or benefit for the listener. The best communicators are those who speak not just to be heard, but to help others understand, feel, or think in a new way. When people talk only to express their own feelings or experiences without considering how it affects the listener, the message falls flat. It becomes more about self-expression than communication. There is a difference between speaking from the heart and speaking with purpose. Speaking with purpose means asking yourself why you are sharing something and what someone else can gain from it. This reflection brings clarity and strength to your words. Imagine sitting in a room, listening to someone talk for several minutes about a vacation they took, every detail of their travel, what they ate, where they stayed, and how much fun they had. Unless you are deeply interested in that person or planning a similar trip, it is easy to lose interest. But if that same story is told in a way that highlights a lesson learned, a cultural insight, or a funny moment that others can relate to, it becomes engaging. The difference lies in how the story is shaped for the listener, not just for the speaker. Value in communication does not always mean giving advice or presenting facts. Sometimes value comes from emotion, humor, inspiration, or honesty. A personal story about failure told with humility and reflection can offer encouragement to someone else. A moment of doubt that turned into growth can give others hope. Even a small everyday experience can become meaningful when it is told in a way that connects to something larger, like patience, kindness, or courage. Connection is at the heart of meaningful communication. To connect, you must see beyond your own story and think about what your listener cares about. You must tune into their interests, needs, or challenges. This requires empathy and awareness. Ask yourself what would matter to them, what they might take away from your words, or how your experience can reflect something universal. When you start to think this way, your speech becomes more than just talking. It becomes sharing. This also means knowing when not to speak. If a personal story has no real message, if it does not teach, comfort, inspire, or relate, it might be better left unsaid. Silence in some moments speaks louder than a long explanation. Giving space to others, allowing their voices to rise, and listening more than speaking can also be powerful forms of communication. It is not always about being the center of attention. Sometimes your value comes from knowing how to support others with your presence and your words. Purposeful sharing builds respect and trust. People begin to see you not just as someone who talks, but as someone worth listening to. They remember how you made them feel, not just what you said. They recognize the thoughtfulness behind your words and appreciate that you cared enough to consider their time and experience. You have the ability to influence others every time you speak. Use that gift with intent. Whether you are telling a story, giving an opinion, or offering a reflection, ask yourself who it helps and why it matters. When you speak with that kind of clarity and care, your words carry weight. They stick with people not because you talked about yourself, but because you gave something meaningful through your voice. Balanced conversations where both parties speak and listen lead to deeper understanding and stronger connections. When communication becomes one-sided, it loses its value. People do not just want to hear someone talk, they want to be part of the interaction. If only one person is doing all the talking, especially about themselves, the other person begins to feel like their presence does not matter. Over time, this kind of behavior weakens relationships and builds distance instead of connection. Meaningful dialogue depends on mutual respect. Listening is just as important as speaking, and sometimes even more so. When you give someone your attention, when you truly hear what they are saying, you show them that their thoughts and feelings are important. This creates trust. People feel safe to open up, to share their real thoughts, and to engage more fully. On the other hand, when someone feels constantly talked over or ignored, they shut down. They might still nod and smile, but inside they are disconnected. In every conversation, both people bring their own stories, emotions, and perspectives. A good exchange happens when these different elements are allowed to surface. You can only understand someone if you make space for their voice. Always fill the room. There is no room left for anyone else's ideas. Over time, people begin to avoid those who dominate conversations. They feel that their presence does not matter, and they stop trying to connect. True communication is about give and take. It means sharing your experiences when they are relevant, but also asking about the other person. It means offering your thoughts, but also inviting theirs. It means paying attention to body language, tone, and silence, because these often speak louder than words. It means knowing when to step back and let someone else speak, even if you have something to say. When you allow others to participate, you build a connection that goes beyond words. You show them that their presence has value. You create a space where both people can learn and grow. This does not happen when one person controls the conversation or uses it only to talk about themselves. It happens when both people feel heard, respected, and involved. In group settings, this becomes even more important. A good speaker knows how to engage the room, not just speak at it. They ask questions, pause for reactions, and respond to what others say. They understand that communication is not a performance. It is a relationship. The same is true in one-on-one conversations. When you show genuine interest in what someone else has to say, you make them feel seen and valued. That kind of attention is rare, and it makes your presence memorable. Even disagreement can be healthy when both people are allowed to speak. You do not have to agree with someone or respect their voice. In fact, listening to different views can deepen your understanding and challenge your thinking in a positive way. But this only works when both sides are willing to listen and respond with respect. One-sided communication closes the door to that growth. Balance also means knowing your own limits. You do not always have to fill silence with stories or opinions. Sometimes being present and listening is enough. Letting others lead the conversation can be a powerful gesture. It shows confidence and humility. It proves that you do not need to be the center of attention to feel secure in yourself. People remember those who listen. They feel close to those who make space for them. When your conversations are balanced, people will want to keep talking to you, not because you talk a lot, but because you listen well. You create real connection, not just noise. And in a world where everyone wants to be heard, that kind of presence is rare and valuable.